Hello, guys. Hi, everyone. Hello. Hello, guys. Please type yes if you hear my voice. Hi, everyone. Please type yes if you hear my voice. Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you. Hi, how are you? Thank you. Yes. Oh, okay. That's great. Thank you. So, guys, thank you so much for joining to this live session. My name is Hamid Hassanzadeh. I'm the founder of Parametric Architecture platform on Instagram and everywhere. I'm your host today, and we have a very special guest. He's an artist. I will invite him a couple of minutes after this. He will join us and he will talk about his visions, his artworks, and his visions for the future. His name is Daniel Arsham. Daniel Arsham is a contemporary American visual artist whose work exists in between art, architecture, and performance. He co-founded Sn Architecture, which is known for investigating the unknown within architecture. Arsham creates indefinable moments by manipulating and reinterpreting existing materials and structure to give a spectacular effects for viewers. So, guys, thank you so much for joining to this live session. I'm inviting Daniel Arsham to this live session. And you can ask your questions by writing into the question box down below. So please write your questions in the question box down below. I will ask them in the middle and at the end of the interview with Daniel Arsham. So if you have any question, guys, thank you. Please write it to the question box down below. So I'm inviting Daniel to the live session. Just waiting for the request. There we go. Hi,
Hello.
Daniel. Hello. Hello. Hi,
Thank you
Daniel.
so much for having me.
Thanks for joining to this live session and thanks for
Yes, my
accepting our
pleasure.
interview request.
Absolutely.
Great to see you here. The mic is yours if you want to say hello to our audience.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be discussing architecture in unusual times. Certainly something that the world is going to be revisiting and rethinking in the coming months and years ahead, and something that myself and my team at Sn Architecture have been investigating about, what design and architecture means moving forward.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So would you please discuss a little bit about yourself and who is Daniel Arsham? What makes Daniel Arsham Daniel Arsham?
So, I've always been interested in architecture, and I wanted to study architecture originally, but wasn't accepted into the architecture school, and ended up studying visual art instead. Although a lot of my work always manipulated or intervened within architecture. And early on in my career, there were some opportunities that necessitated a kind of architectural thinking and really an architectural skill set. So I worked with an architect I had gone to school with, Alex Mustanin, to help me realize some of these projects. And Sn Architecture grew out of that initial investigation as a way to expand some of the ideas I was working with in my own art practice into a larger kind of architectural scale. Since then, my work has gone sort of in one direction. And in the beginning, I think there was a much more close link between the aesthetic and kind of ethos within Sn Architecture.
Right.
But over the 10 years of the practice, it's kind of developed its own language and really its own kind of voice. And there are occasions now where I'm pleasantly surprised that people don't know my involvement in Sn Architecture has its own
Right.
kind of life. Yeah.
Right. So, what is the journey of becoming an artist? Like, was this something like you were planning from your childhood, or because you rejected from architecture and you turned it to artist? What is the journey? What is the story?
I mean, I've always, as I said, been interested in architecture. I studied photography for a long time. My grandfather was kind of an amateur photographer and gave me, a camera when I was quite young. So it was, I would say, intentional to pursue this path, and I ended up studying in a couple different schools that were specializing in design and architecture. In fact, the high school that I went to is called Design and Architecture Senior High School. So very
Right.
focused in these areas. Yeah.
Awesome. So how are you doing and how are you working during this pandemic? Like, is it affected your office and your work style? Like,
Yeah, I mean, we closed our studio quite early, in early March. We're located in New York City, so it was a kind of center of things that were
right,
happening. And in some ways, Snarchitecture has been quite good at working remotely because it's largely computer work anyways. And we host regular meetings with our team and staff. And so many of our projects are well out into the future, stretching to 2021 and beyond, that we're able to kind of continue on those projects. A little bit more challenging on my art studio side because the studio is a place where we produce objects and sculptural work. So some of that has been brought home, and for myself, I've in school I actually studied painting and
right,
have gotten kind of away from that over the last 10 years or so. And in the last 2 months, I've really gone back into painting in a kind of a big way and spent a lot of time. I set up a painting studio at my house, and I've been doing that here.
right.
Yeah.
So, what do you think this pandemic have given the opportunities us to rethink about the things that we were doing? What will be changed in the future, and what kind of like the impact that this pandemic has on the future of art, architecture? What do you think about it?
I mean, I think that some of the most, prolific and impactful art over the last, I mean, certainly 100 years has been made in times of crisis or following crisis. So if we think about work that came following World War One, World War Two, other sort of, the AIDS crisis globally, I think that there's certainly going to be a period of introspection around what's important. Certainly, in the design and architecture side, um, a lot of the things that we've focused on in our own work has been about an architecture of experience that requires large groups of people to be present within them. And, what does it mean when you have to redesign spaces for smaller groups of people, how people are navigating these spaces? I think
Right,
all of those are going to be new questions we're going to have to answer.
right. We've got a question from one of our followers. I'm just popping it up here. Just 1 second. How do you choose your location to shoot at? And what inspires you to shoot at there?
Does he mean like the photography?
Photography, filming, for example, the
Oh,
future
right, the
relic.
Future Relic.
Yeah.
So this Future Relic film that he's referring to is actually an interesting story. I discovered that there was a amazing Saarinen building that had been abandoned for many years in New Jersey, and this location was the original Bell Laboratories, where lasers and all of these kind of fantastic inventions were created. So I shot a portion of Future Relic there, which is this incredible. I mean, I think at the height of it, there was like 10,000 scientists working there. So it was almost like a miniature city.
Wow. Right.
And, architecture has always found its way into my work in general. And it's, I think as a designer or as an artist, the even the design of the museums and the spaces in which I've shown my work, I'm considering those.
Right, right. So, what is the story behind Future Relic? How it came to life?
Mm. Originally, I began thinking about creating works that were a kind of fictional archaeology. You know, I did a trip in Easter Island a little over 10 years ago that inspired this investigation of archaeology and really a projection of contemporary objects into the future. So, could I take, you know, a camera or a turntable or a computer and cause it to be or cause it to appear as if it's been found on some future archaeological site. And in my creation of these works, there was a lot of writing and questioning about what is the world in which these objects exist, right? In which an object from our own life appears degraded and calcified and sort of with age. And a lot of the interpretation of it was kind of apocalyptic. And for me, I didn't feel this sense. For me, it was a kind of investigation of the inevitability of time passing. So I created this narrative, Future Relic, to start to tease out some of the ideas around that, projecting what this future world kind of looks like.
Right, right. Uh, why it is important to make art for everyone? I think in one of your interviews you've mentioned this. I'm interested in that.
I mean, I think art is really the way that we as a culture and as a society kind of investigate ourselves and reinterpret ourselves. So artists have the job to take all of these elements of everyday life globally, kind of run them through this individual filter and push them back out. And I also find it to be, you know, it's a universal language. It's something that, like architecture, it's something we don't need to have studied to interpret. It's a kind of open dialogue, and in that way, I think it's one of the most important sort of gestures that we can make as humans.
Right. We've got a really good question in here. So, who would you like to work with in the future, and what is a project that you wish to undertake?
I mean, certainly film is something that I would like to expand on in my own work. I mean, I touched on it a little bit with Future Relic. And you know, more recently, I've done a couple of projects that involve animation. So I just did a project where I worked with the Pokemon company from Japan.
Yes.
And you know, it could be amazing to continue that project with them. There there's such a kind of a universe that was created within that animation that still resonates with me from my childhood.
Yeah, right. You have also worked with top brands like Pokemon, like Adidas, like
Mm.
even with William Farrell's you have collaborated. How does these collaborations with top artists, not like top brands, just
Hmm.
affect your artwork or architecture?
Yeah, I think, you know, I have always surrounded myself with many different types of people, right? People from different walks of life, as well as people who are experts in disciplines that are outside of my own. And a lot of my friends happen
Right.
to be in fashion and design in that way. And this has naturally caused me to collaborate with some of them. Ronnie Feig from Kith is a longtime friend of mine. And, you know, more recently, I did a very large collaboration with Dior, which was at the invitation of Kim Jones. And really, I think there have been, or there is a kind of resistance within the art world to see this kind of commercial aspect. And I think that my position was, as an artist, I want my work to speak to as many people as possible. And there are people who, for whatever reason, don't visit museums or galleries, or they live in places where those don't exist. And the collaborations that I've done with Dior and with Adidas, they bring this work to a much wider audience. And
Yeah,
my
right.
feeling was, as long as I can stay true to the things, I only make things that I want to see personally exist in the world. So any work that you see, I made it first for me, and then it's for everyone else. And I feel if I can kind of stay true to this and use the reach of some of these brands, this can only be a net positive.
Right, right. Actually, at the end of this live show, I would like to ask you to show an office tour around your office, the works, the things that you are working on. But before, I want to ask my questions. Then a couple of questions are from our followers as well. So,
Mm.
what inspires you, Daniel?
I mean, certainly cinema. I've been a longtime fan of film, and there's a lot of integration of some of these environments and scenarios in my work. Science fiction has played a big part in the things that I'm interested in. Um, and I mean, travel was a huge inspiration to me.
Yes.
Certainly, it's going to change now that I've been locked down for the past 2 months, but I think visiting other places, especially Japan and a lot of places in Asia, have had a big impact on my work and on my life in general.
Yeah, right. Also, there's a question from one of our followers. I will just pop it up here. What is your favorite movie? You've just mentioned movies.
Oh, it's a tough one. Um, I
Like
mean,
how?
the Back to the Future trilogy has obviously had a big, impact on me, and I think, Back to the Future 2 is this film that I've gone back to so many times. Um, there's just so many elements of that film that resonate with me, and it has such a kind of strong impact. I'd probably pick that one if I had to pick one.
Okay. Also, what do you think about AI-driven design in architecture and even in art? What is going to happen for the future? Do you
Mm.
think it's going to have a really big impact or a big role in design as well?
I think, I mean, when I studied in school at Cooper Union, it was just before the period that computers became really big in terms of design. Certainly, students were learning CAD and different programs, but a lot of it was still hand drawn.
It's like
And
it was around 2012, 2, 3,
2003 is when I graduated.
3.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And I think that there is an initial kind of fascination with the ability of computer modeling, and
Right.
certainly there's some amazing things that come out of a parametric system. However, I think that those designs are only as good as the maker who can manipulate them with, in some cases, their own hands to feel human and be functional, right? So I think that within Snarchitecture, we've very seldom used direct computer generated algorithms as the final result. We've used them as a way to visualize things. And I think that this is where that kind of AI driven modeling can be most helpful, is to see something that either with ease of use or just time, as a time saver, can be something that can generate things which would be virtually impossible to do by hand. But I,
Right.
I, I really do believe in the kind of simplicity of the hand. And sometimes we'll take things out of the computer into physical space in order to sort of visualize them and feel the space.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Mm,
We've got another question from one of our followers. Just 1 second.
mm.
I lost it. Sorry. There we go. Do you think school qualifications are more useful than talent in the real world?
So I'm a big believer in undergraduate education. Um, I didn't go to graduate school, and my general thinking is that it's less useful than going out in the world and actually having some real experience. Um, I think, uh, I think it's Werner Herzog who said this, but walking by foot from Moscow to Paris would be more of an education than going to graduate school. And I think this is an
Good
idea.
quote.
This is an idea about real life experience, and even working. I did a number of internships following school and worked under other people to kind of gain real life experience, and I think this is super important.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. I mean, yeah, there are, I think uh, school also just limits talents as well, and it's
Mhm.
just not a reliable source to believe that, yeah, someone is good in art or not. Actually, I believe art is not teachable, actually. It's just, you can just find it
Yeah.
from your instincts, from your inside, and what you like, and in your own style.
Yes,
So
I would
it's
agree.
exactly, yeah. So I will ask another questions from one of our followers. Have you ever thought of making your sculptures in other materials?
So there's a huge range of materials within my work that have developed slowly, and part of the issue around this is, when I first started making these cast objects, I was intending to use non-traditional casting materials like volcanic ash and certain types of crystal, and the purpose for this was the idea that the material of the thing could tell you as much about the content, right, of the
Right,
object as just the visual quality of it being degraded. However, volcanic ash and crystal, there's no real technique for casting those. So I had to sort of develop this. And the evolution of material in my work runs hand in hand with trial and error and failure, right? So the first time that I cast the volcanic ash, it didn't work, and I had to try other methods. And I a good friend of mine is an art conservator who restores paintings from the Renaissance and forward. And I spoke with her a lot about material properties and things that want to react and issues that I was having within the casting process. So she's helped me
right.
sort of figure out what materials will work and which will not.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Would you like to show us around in your office
So
and a couple
I'm
of your works?
yeah, I'll just show you around. I'm actually in my living room because my wife is using the office for another meeting, but this is a really great Austin Lee painting
Right.
here. And maybe I'll turn around. I don't know if I can reverse this. Yeah, here we go. This is
Yeah.
this architecture bear brick project, that we did, which it looks like it has this kind of eroded hole into it, but actually it's just totally flat there.
Wow. Right.
Um,
Awesome.
Over here, this is this incredible. This is actually not my work. It's a work of Mark Quinn, the British artist, and it's a bonsai, but it's been cast in bronze completely.
It looks
So we're inside.
brilliant.
This lamp here is a more recent piece that actually I showed at Design Miami and my kids' toys everywhere around. But this used this wood used an interesting process where we put together plywood, set it on an angle, right?
Yeah, it doesn't look like wood.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like
Yeah.
ply, but it
Yeah.
enabled, this pattern was all because we rotated we rotated the plywood on an angle before it was milled.
Wow,
So this was a lamp that I
impressive.
did design Miami, and then this is this really incredible. This is a Fay Too Good solid glass cast chair that I got from this amazing design gallery, Friedman Benda.
Us.
Yeah,
It looks brilliant.
just a couple things. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other artists that you love their works? Like you admire their works?
I mean, I've spoken about this before, but James Turrell, is one of my favorite artists, and his work, the idea of working with something as ephemeral and non-existent as light. His work is more about framing something that is intangible than about the thing itself. And both the idea behind that and the experience in his work is almost like religious in a way.
Right. Someone asks from our followers, Omtoki, asks, Daniel, why only white in your works?
So even though there's a lot of color around me right now, I'm actually pretty severely colorblind. And so I have a pretty strong limitation in certain wavelengths of light. So
Right.
early on, not by intention, but I guess just by the colors that I was drawn to, I worked primarily in black and white. And in addition, a lot of the architectural works that I was creating were shown in museums and galleries, which is effectively a white box.
Mhm.
And when I was manipulating the surface of the wall, the works were white because, the walls were white.
Yeah, awesome.
Mm.
We've got another question from one of our followers. Just 1 second, I will pop it up here. How did you approach sculpture in the first place?
So I think this is a big question for a lot of, younger artists is the things that I make today. I don't think I could have made 15 years ago when I was first starting, both from a physical space and expertise point of view, but also like a financial point of view. Some of the bronze works that I make are quite expensive to produce. And in the beginning, as I said, I studied painting, and most of the works that I made following school for the first few years were all these kind of imaginations, right, of scenarios and things that perhaps I would make one day. So the transition um, from painting to sculpture really started with a piece. The first major one was in 2005. And before that, I was making a lot of paintings that were kind of landscapes, very traditional kind of painterly landscapes with these architectural constructions within them that looked human made, that appeared to be either in a state of destruction, like they were falling apart, or they were growing together. We couldn't quite tell which direction they were going. And there was never any people in the paintings, so they had this kind of ambiguity of time, right? They could have been now or in the past or in the future. And when I started making physical sculptural works, there was an inverse scenario where instead of having a kind of natural scenario with architecture within it, I had an architectural universe with natural formations kind of coming back into it. So imagine a wall that was eroding like a glacier, or a column of a building that looked kind of like a stalactite in a cave. Um,
Wow.
so there were these kind of opposing ideas that sort of did work quite well hand in hand.
Yeah. How do you see the future of sculpture?
In my own work, you mean, or in general?
In general, in your own work?
I mean, I think certainly, there's been some interesting things happening more recently about how to experience sculptural work through a tiny little screen, that we're all looking at all the time.
Right.
And I think, AR and VR certainly have a big potential. Um,
Do you have anything in mind to create something with AR VR?
A couple of years ago, it's ironic because I actually just found the filter this morning, but a couple years ago, I did a project with Snapchat. This was kind of very early days. I think it was like 2016 or 17, in which you could place one of my sculptures in, a space and scale it and rotate it. Somebody, if you watch my stories now, I posted the AR link in Snapchat. I don't know if it still works, but effectively it was a way to place a sculpture in a physical space without the thing being actually there. And I think that there's
Right.
some interesting possibilities. I think it can get a bit gimmicky quite quickly. It needs to be connected to something in the real world is where it can get really interesting. Or as something that's connected to a future physical experience.
Right. That's
Mm.
right. So one of our followers asked, would you please show us around about other places in your office? But you said it's not possible right now, right?
Well, my wife is in my office, but maybe I'll just walk outside real quick to show you a little bit of the garden. And the house that I live in is a 1969 Norman Jaffe house, and so this is the Japanese garden
Wow, brilliant.
outside.
Daniel,
We're not getting a great view of it now,
Daniel,
but
do you
it
hear
has a
me?
lot of. Yeah, I hear you. Are you there?
Okay, okay, yeah, we just lost
Sorry,
one connection
sorry.
just a
If I
few
go too far
seconds. It's
outside, I'll
okay.
lose you. um,
Okay, okay, I'm hearing you now.
yes.
I hear you now. Yeah. Uh, were you continuing, or may I ask anything other?
Yeah, yeah. Go for it. Go for
Another
it.
question?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a question from one of our followers. Is there any relationship with real time and architecture?
I think one of the things that we've tried to pay a lot of attention to with Snow Architecture, as well as my own exhibitions, is the way that we experience time through space, right? So an architect can control the way that people move through a space by changing the rhythm of the stairs or the depth of the stairs or things like placing walls in certain areas. And it makes me think, I did a large exhibition in Shanghai in China last year, and there was a series of walls that went through a space with a cutout in the middle of all of them. So when you entered the show, you could see from the front of the show almost all the way to the back, but the
Wow.
walls in plan were offset. So you couldn't walk straight through. You had to kind of walk around all of them.
Around walls.
And it did a couple things. One is it delayed the pacing of people moving through the show. It gave them a sense of the complete space from the beginning without really being able to get to the end. And for the people viewing the show from the beginning, it made the viewers a kind of part of the show, right? Because not only were you seeing the full space, but you were seeing people move through it, and they were moving in opposite directions, right?
Wow.
Because they're walking through this space. So things like that, where we're able to use architecture as a way to literally curate the amount of time that people are moving through a space, I think can be really useful.
Brilliant, brilliant works. We're getting a lot of thank you messages, and also they are saying thank you, congrats for your works and for this live session as well.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. As closer, do you have any suggestions, advice for young artists, young architects, students, young professionals in general? What kind of advice would you like to share with them?
Mm. I mean, I think there can be a sense for a lot of people that at a certain point in your career, you might reach a kind of equilibrium where you don't have to struggle anymore and things are like easy and you're just kind of coasting. That point never really exists, right? I'm working as hard as I was in the beginning of my career today. And there's really no, it might feel like when you look at certain artists or architects that there's a kind of overnight success, like all of a sudden they're everywhere. You see them constantly. And, I think I was reading a friend of mine, I can't remember who it was, posting about this idea of overnight success. It's like you don't see the 15 years before that, that all of a sudden they appeared, but they've been working on this thing. So,
Exactly.
find a way to create a job that makes you never feel like you're working. And if you continue with doing you for long enough, eventually somebody will find an interest in that as well.
Yeah, great, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, my
We have
pleasure.
we have a great message from Brazil. I would like just pop it up here.
Okay.
Hello, Daniel. You have thousands of fans here in Brazil. I follow your work, and I think my congratulations are incredible. I just wanted to say it to you.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a number of exhibitions in Brazil. I love it there. Um, I did a big project in Sao Paulo in a gallery called Barro. And I guess 2 or 3 years ago, I did a very large exhibition outside in a
Right.
park that overlooked the famous Sugarloaf Mountain. It was a Japanese inspired garden. So I have a big fondness for Brazil.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you like to get another question?
Sure.
Have you watched the Blade Runner movie?
Of course. Yes.
Okay,
Another
there
favorite.
we go. What do you think about how future is depicted in Blade Runner?
I mean, I think, uh, you know, humanity has always depicted the kind of end of civilization, and we're in this bizarre scenario now where um, things are very different from how they were just a couple months ago. And
Yeah,
my feeling in general is there are very few events in history that the entire world experiences together. I can't even think of any other ones that are this tight in our lifetime. And I think that with all of the kind of death and despair and difficulties that this is going to cause for everyone, there's also an opportunity to rethink what it means for us to kind of share a kind of global experience, right? It's a kind of it's an equalizer in a way. And I think that the pace of life, certainly the pace of travel, the pace of consumption, all of these things need to be revisited in this new era that follows this. And if we come out of this exactly the same as we were before, then we've all sort of lost in a way.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
your awesome discussion. Thanks for
Yes,
your
my pleasure.
great advice as well. Do you have any
Absolutely.
final words to say to our audience?
I mean, I say this on when I go live always, but keep art in your life and art for life.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, bye
Thank you.
bye.
Bye bye. Goodbye. Guys, thank you so much for joining to this live session. You saw we got a lot of questions from our audiences. It was really great. It was really great to speak with Daniel as well. It was so exciting for me as well. Please stay with us with more upcoming interviews with artists, architects, and designers of our generation, the pioneers of our generations. So we will keep you updated, and thank you. Goodbye.